Hello, my name is Nicole Wade. This is my video recording for my major project part 2 for operations 1432. The question for discussion is a null hypothesis states that a process has not improved after some modifications were made. The type 2 error is to conclude that A. One has failed to reject the null hypothesis when it is true. B. One has failed to reject the null hypothesis when it is false. C. One has rejected the null hypothesis. And D. One has made a correct decision with an alpha probability. The answer that I've chosen is B, which is one has failed to reject the null hypothesis when it is false. Now, the reason for my selected answer is a type 2 error occurs when you fail to reject a null hypothesis. That is actually false. So, if the process did actually improve due to the modifications, but your analysis concludes that there was no improvement, that would be a type 2 error. Essentially, you would be failing to reject the false null hypothesis that the process did not improve. Now, on my right, I have a photo of a pregnant woman visiting her doctor. This is showing a type 2 error, which is a false negative. Patient is not pregnant. The hypothesis says the patient is not pregnant in this scenario. The doctor failed to reject the hypothesis when it is false. Why are A, C, and D incorrect? Starting with A. One has failed to reject the null hypothesis when it is true. If the null hypothesis is true, then in this scenario there is no improvement, which would mean the correct decision was made in failing to reject or accepting the null hypothesis when it is true. Therefore, this is not a type 2 error. For my photo on the right, the doctor failed to reject the hypothesis when it is true, which is the patient is not pregnant. For my next selected incorrect answer, which is C, one has rejected the null hypothesis. This could mean one of two things: a type 1 error if the null hypothesis is true, or it could be a correct decision if the null hypothesis is false. Rejecting the null hypothesis under either circumstance, however, does not describe a type 2 error. For my final selected incorrect answer, which is D, one has made a correct decision with an alpha probability. Alpha probability, or significance level, is the probability of making a type 1 error, which is rejecting the null hypothesis when it is true. This is when one makes the correct decision when there is a predetermined threshold for rejecting the null hypothesis when it is true. This certainly does not describe a type 2 error. I hope you enjoyed watching this presentation. I welcome any questions that you guys might have. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.